We are slaying monsters.
Don't let the ghosts and the ghouls disturb you, darling.
Winchester. When I die and go to heaven, which is exactly what's going to happen, because I'm such a good person. I'm such a good person. All I want to know is what is my kitten saying to the cat when they're playing? Because she's always going. And all I want to know is what they're saying.
It's probably just hey.
I know, and that's going to be the biggest disappointment.
Fuck you.
It's going to be like, okay, you can know what happened with JFK. You can know all the details about Amelia Earhart if you want, but you want to fucking know what your cat is saying to your other cat.
I mean, most of the time, I think it's just play with me.
Probably.
Play with me now.
Well, I can burn an eternity knowing that, and I'll feel better about myself. I'll feel better.
You burn an eternity in heaven.
Yeah. No, I think through this conversation, I've realized that I'm definitely not going to heaven, and it's been a journey in this 2-minute conversation where I've just sort of reconciled that it's not happening for me.
But none of us know where we're going.
None of us do.
In fact, maybe you won't be going to heaven. Maybe you will just be stuck here on Earth, wandering the halls of your own home.
Well, if it's my house, it'll probably take about 5 minutes.
Yeah, that's actually true. I mean, we don't even have a dozen rooms in our house.
No.
Right?
No, I haven't counted. I don't think our listeners care how many rooms we have either.
But I can tell you definitively that we don't have over 100 rooms. Yes. Which is, of course, what Sarah Winchester has in her house. And our house also doesn't take up 3 city blocks.
No, not yet.
We're going to talk about that house today. Not our house, Sarah's house.
That would be a very short episode if we talked about our house. Okay, yes, Sarah Winchester house. Oh, by the way, this is Slaying Monsters. And we got Matt across the table, and I'm EJ, obviously. Here we go. Winchester House Part 2.
Oh, before we get into this.
Oh, okay.
Do you want to talk about listener?
Yes. So we had a listener write in who I know personally, leaving them anonymous, but they suffered from sleep paralysis, and they wanted to tell me this super cool spooky story about how they had a sleep paralysis event happen to them in which they astral projected and were able to visit their partner at the time and saw them in their house. And when this person woke up from their sleep paralysis, they called their partner immediately and said, I know this is a weird question, but please tell me what you were wearing and what you were doing just now.
That's a very, very loaded question right there. Right?
Like, this is not sexy time talk. This is a serious matter. Dagnabbit, wouldn't you know it, that person was wearing exactly what they saw, and they were doing exactly what they saw they saw that they were doing. By the way, they were playing a musical instrument. It wasn't like it wasn't like that crazy, but they were playing a musical instrument wearing exactly the same clothing that they saw. So anyway, that's pretty cool, I think.
It's interesting. So that was during a sleep paralysis episode, and they astral projected.
Yes.
This is cool. So after Winchester House, and we finish this series, the next series we're going to talk about sleep paralysis in that, and all of the like weird, wonky physiological things that happen, and the way that your mind deals with stuff, and what the hallucinations are like when you see it, when you're experiencing it.
Take that, skeptic. What are you gonna do now? What are you gonna do now, huh?
Should I deal with this?
No, I'm just messing. No, I'm just messing. You don't have to deal with it if you don't want to.
I'm not sure.
No, we're not here to deal with it. No, I'm not here to be jerks and to do that. Okay. But I thought that was a cool story.
So they astral projected, meaning that they left their body behind and traveled to a different place.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So this is the thing that's always really interesting to me, right? When you astral project, are you here and then there? Or did you actually have to get up, get in a spirit car, or fly? Like what
Spirit Airlines.
Yeah, no, this is because this is something that always intrigues me. Were you cognizant of the travel to get there, or were you able to just pick and choose where you wanted to go because you were, quote unquote, untethered from your body?
Yeah.
Were you unbound by that?
Yeah.
That's something that fascinates me is like we tend not to focus on the minutia of that during these events, but that's interesting to me. Do you process the journey or do you just jump? Because I never read about the jumps. I only ever read about like, oh, now I was in this other room.
Well, I want to say it's probably dependent upon the person. I bet you get both answers depending on.
Depending on their disposition.
Yeah. Or how
their
aware
experience.
they are.
Yeah, depending on their experience.
In the
right?
moment. Yeah. But anyway.
Well, so again, we're going to talk about not astral projection, but we're going to talk about sleep paralysis in the next series. So stick around for that. If you have experiences with sleep paralysis, write them into us, slayingmonsterspodcast@gmail.com. I think it's a really, really fascinating little event occurrence in the paranormal realm, especially when you start to talk about the hag and what people see and the frequency of not the frequency, but the repetition of sightings and how a lot of people end up seeing what we think are the same things over and over again.
Yes.
Really interesting. It makes me think of, is it ayahuasca? We had a friend who was talking to us about how when you go on certain drug trips, you have similar hallucinations depending on the drug. Like there's a certain drug that makes you see a woman.
Yeah.
I feel like it wasn't ayahuasca. I feel like it was something else.
Oh yeah, no, it wasn't. It was something else. It was like some other. I think it was a type of mushroom.
Okay.
But I don't know for sure.
Yeah, and then you see something very specific. Well, then there's the thing that makes you see gremlins too, right?
Yeah, I guess
or leprechauns.
So. Yeah. I mean, this is all like
type stuff.
Anecdotal, like hearsay. I don't really know if this is all very true, but this is like what our friends had said to us about it, which... Yeah,
that you see the same types of entities when you alter your mind in certain ways.
Mm-hmm. And knowing nothing about it, I can't claim that that's a thing or not, but maybe you can, listener, if you want to write in. But
tell us about the weird shit you saw on your drug trips.
Yeah, man. Yeah, definitely. I want to hear that. Give me some Hunter S. Thompson stuff.
Okay, so you want to move on to Sarah Winchester?
Yes, I'm sure our audience does too.
Great. So when we last left Sarah Winchester, she'd lost a baby and she'd been channeling the grief from that loss into helping the architect Henry Austin design a new home for herself and for her family. Remember that she and her husband William are staying with their in-laws right now. They hadn't really had the opportunity to get a house on their own. She had been hoping that motherhood would kind of give her independence, help her build her own identity, and then they lost their baby, and unfortunately that's not in the cards for her. Her husband William's working for his father Oliver Winchester, and they are spending a lot of their time at work expanding the Winchester Repeating Arms Company into the American West. As far back as 1830, America was manifesting its destiny all over indigenous populations. So the Indian Removal Act, which was signed by President Andrew Jackson, annexed land west of the Mississippi and allowed the American military to forcefully move indigenous tribes and populations onto new territories. Jackson himself believed that this was the only way to keep these indigenous tribes from being completely devastated by the migrating settlers. Although it kind of seems like, as president, he could have put laws in place that made it illegal to kill them or something like that, but he didn't.
Or to protect the land that they were sitting on that was theirs?
You would think so, and the president of the United States is over here oh man, my hands are tied, but...
Yeah, we know exactly what the hell he was doing.
Following in his misguided footsteps, Martin Van Buren sent federal fucking troops to march thousands of Choctaw people, some of them bound in chains, 1,200 miles across the country on foot to their new home. A Choctaw leader called it a trail of tears and death, a phrase that got republished all over the country. This is gonna be a really uplifting episode right here.
Yeah. No warning, just going right into this.
Private John Burnett said this: "Men working in the fields were arrested and driven to the stockades. Women were dragged from their homes by soldiers whose language they could not understand. Children were often separated from their parents and driven into the stockades with the sky for a blanket and the earth for a pillow. And often the old and infirm were prodded with bayonets to hasten them into the stockades." The Trail of Tears, which is technically a bunch of different routes spanning over 5,000 miles, was followed a decade later by the Indian Appropriations Act. And this subdivided the land further, creating a bunch of reservations for individual tribes to live on. Ostensibly to protect the tribes from these incoming homesteaders, the true motive was barely concealed: to continue to strip their land and cultural identity away.
And this is around the time that they started to put these children into boarding schools. Right?
Yeah. So this is like the mid 19th century. And what was happening was the Christian missionaries were setting up boarding schools specifically for Native American children to teach them Christianity and to further continue to strip away their heritage, their identity, and reform them into what was considered like a good white Christian value system.
Yeah.
Good white Christian identity.
Yeah. Meanwhile, the good white Christian value system is spreading like a disease, east to west, across the country.
So by 1871, a second Appropriations Act was put into place that no longer acknowledged the indigenous tribes as sovereign nations. And this little loophole, because they're now saying like, okay, you're not actually a nation. You have no national. You don't have authority. You have no national authority
in your jurisdiction. Maybe.
Yeah. No jurisdiction as compared to the American government.
Right. The United States has greater authority over. Yeah.
Yeah, and that allowed the federal United States government to just start seizing as much fucking land from them as they wanted to, because it didn't belong to the people that lived there. It belonged to the American state. They had no authority over it. The American state owned it. Make no mistake, this forced removal and segregation was a method of subtle genocide. Despite what lawmakers said, their claims of keeping indigenous tribes safe from incoming settlers, this was all a specifically targeted campaign with the intent of destroying the native population and paving the way for westward expansion.
Yep. How about you just not let the fucking settlers settle? I mean, I know this is like, I know it's messy and it's hard and whatever, but I mean, I don't know. Well, I'm just saying the obvious and preaching to the choir.
Funny. It's funny because part of the reason that there was westward expansion at all was because the cities on the East Coast were becoming so dirty and so poor. So to combat this rising East Coast population, the U.S. government issued a series of homestead acts and offered up millions of acres of farmland in the western United States to any American adult. All you had to do was apply.
And be white.
I actually don't think that's true.
No?
I think the black people could get land. Yeah. The 1866 Civil Rights Act and the 14th Amendment guaranteed that African Americans were eligible for the Homestead Act as well.
Good. Okay.
Yeah. You just had to be an American adult and not a Native American. The famed newspaper man Horace Greeley, who we talked about before with his connection with the Fox sisters, he's credited with coining the phrase, "Go west, young man. Go west and grow up with the country." But the actual origin of that phrase is unknown. It's just one of those that get credited to him. The prevailing narrative at this point is that the western United States is this raw, untouched country. It's full of potential, and it's guarded by native savages. That's the way they're...
That's the way that they're saying
That's the way they're painting it, right? And we see here, as we so often do in Western history, the white knight of Christianity struggling against the bestial and barbaric savagery of people who just happened to exist in the country before they showed up. It's the same story, the good Christians bringing religion and sense to a people and finally taming them into submission and respectable life. And this is the narrative that they're playing over and over as we are pushing west. So they're saying, go west, find your fortune, be aware that it's dangerous. It's going to be hard out there. There's going to be people who are coming after you.
Yeah, because you're fucking taking their fucking land away.
Yes.
You dumb shits.
Yeah. It's total dogmatic bullshit.
It's been going on for centuries with Christianity.
Yes.
I mean, obviously our listeners aren't stupid. They know that. But it's like so frustrating to fucking see this. It's a constant story with Christianity.
Yes.
How
it's been the same thing over and over.
It has been
again.
the same thing.
Mm-hmm. So this is a huge other conversation that we don't need to have.
Sorry, I'm getting all...
No, it's fine. It's fine. The point here that I want us to walk away with is that you have settlers who are being inspired to move west. Seek your fortune, right? And the route has become much easier thanks to the railroad, like what we talked about in the last episode. But there's still these inherent dangers out there. And what do you need to tackle those dangers yourself? You need a good rifle.
Yes. I thought you were going to say personal pan pizza.
I mean, we do have Smith & Wesson working on their Pizza Hut idea right now,
yeah,
right?
They're working on that in the background, folks. That's all happening. We just didn't want to get into it this time. Maybe next episode. But...
Yeah, next episode we'll talk about the rise of Pizza Hut and the personal pan pizza.
Yeah, delivery out west.
This narrative, you need a good rifle out here, is actually supported when war broke out between the newly aligned Lakota and Cheyenne tribes and the U.S. military. See, the Great Sioux War, which they also call the Black Hills War, is probably best known for Custer's last stand and the Battle of Little Bighorn. In one of the most ironic moments of American history, the 1874 Custer expedition discovered gold in the Black Hills in South Dakota. The problem was the Black Hills was one of the territories that had been outlined as a reservation for the Sioux and Cheyenne in the Laramie Treaty. Prospectors and homesteaders began encroaching on this territory, driven by the rising economic depression in the East. Mm-hmm. But this wasn't their territory. This was a territory that had been specifically set aside as a reservation.
Oops, we gave them good land.
Right.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, exactly. And now all of a sudden they're like, oh, whoa, I think we want that land instead. Mm-hmm. The Sioux tried diplomacy. And Spotted Tail, Red Cloud, and Longhorn all sat through an 11-hour meeting with President Ulysses S. Grant. But negotiations fell apart, primarily because the U.S. government wanted to pay off the Sioux, and the Sioux wanted, a place to live?
Yeah.
So, as a result of these unsuccessful talks, Grant opened the Black Hills region and instructed the military not to evict any American that they found there. So essentially he said, okay, this land that we had formerly called a reservation is no longer a reservation. You can go, you can move there. We're not going to evict you. He also vowed punishment for any Sioux found, as he said, off the reservation.
Oh my God. God forbid somebody who is not a white settler gets gold in these hills.
And they had it there, dude. They had it there.
Greed and racism. Okay.
So the thing is, the Sioux feel there's war coming. And according to James Donovan in his book, A Terrible Glory, Custer and Little Bighorn and the Last Great Battle of the American West, the Sioux started trading their horses, mules, blankets, and furs for weapons in preparation for that eventuality. Their firearm of choice was a repeating rifle, specifically the Winchester, because of its ease of loading and its high-capacity magazine. Armed with these rifles, they fought back, and they claimed victories at Little Bighorn and Slim Buttes. Little Bighorn is probably most famous for being the site of Custer's last stand and a decisive victory for the leader Crazy Horse.
Zuri's being very talkative right now.
Yeah, she is. They're playing.
Yeah.
Custer's tactic at Little Bighorn was to attack the Lakota and Cheyenne encampment and take non-combatants, which here means women and children, as hostages in the battle, with the idea being that essentially if he attacked and he was able to capture women and children, the warriors, the soldiers that the Native Americans had would surrender. But Custer's scouts delivered him an inaccurate count of the warriors, and he thought he could just surround the encampment. And he also assumed that once they were engaged and they rounded up all the non-combatants, that everybody would surrender. But it just kind of backfired pretty bad. They show up and they're outnumbered and they're overconfident. The Lakota and Cheyenne claim a decisive victory, and unfortunately that victory was probably their undoing. The defeat was humiliating for the American military. They were supposedly these superior tacticians, and supposedly they had God on their side, and they were beaten. So they flipped the narrative, and they turned General Custer into a martyr. And the American government used the Battle of Little Bighorn as this rallying cry.
Oh, okay. That makes sense. For the propaganda machine.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's what you do, right? They couldn't say, oh, we got defeated. We were defeated by a superior enemy. They have to be like, oh man, this man bravely sacrificed his life in this battle. Don't worry about the fact that he was going to take women and children as hostages. Like,
oh yeah.
Yeah.
Well, they don't matter to them, I don't think.
This brave individual. So following the defeat, Congress cut off supplies to the Sioux in what the tribes called a sell or starve tactic. Hostilities continued throughout the winter of 1876 and 1877, with the military seizing horses and weapons and supplies at friendly villages to further put pressure on the enemies. Faced with their dwindling resources and concerned about his men's well-being, Crazy Horse surrendered and agreed to meet with an emissary at Fort Robinson. So instead of meeting, Crazy Horse was arrested and taken to a guardhouse. And during his arrest, a struggle ensued, and Crazy Horse was stabbed by a bayonet and died later that evening. We are still unclear as to who initiated that altercation.
So Crazy Horse was completely betrayed. There's so many countless stories of like the U.S. military or colonists saying one thing to the native peoples and then fucking doing another thing.
Oh, yeah.
And it's just endless. And it's still going on to this day. It's like always this struggle of like, you know, being recognized as a tribe, getting some kinds of rights for anything. It's just, my heart hurts every time I fucking hear these stories because it's just, I don't know. I don't understand. I just don't understand it.
Despite the Sioux's military victories, resource deprivation took its toll. War leaders Dull Knife and Standing Elk surrendered in April of 1877, effectively ending the Great Sioux War. For our purposes, it's important to know that Winchester rifles were all over that war. Crazy Horse famously owned one and used it at the Battle of Little Bighorn. Sitting Bull owned one too, which he would ultimately surrender at Fort Buford, saying, "I wish it to be remembered that I was the last man of my tribe to surrender my rifle." So that's what's going on out west. That's what's going on in this narrative, and this is being spread throughout the papers and everything, right? This is that wild, untapped land out there. Meanwhile, in New Haven, the Winchesters are enjoying the opulent life of warmongers. Winchester repeating rifle sales had exploded over that decade, and Oliver Winchester, who arrived in town 20 years prior to this, penniless, is now among the town's wealthy elite. But it won't last. In December of 1880, Oliver Winchester died. He left $1.5 million to his children and his mansion to his wife and William. It's likely that William himself looked particularly bad at the funeral because his health had been declining for some time. He stepped into the role as head of the Winchester Repeating Arms Company, but asked the board to remove him 3 months later.
Ooh, he must have known things were not going so well for him.
It had been years that his health had been declining.
Oh, wow.
And on March 7th of 1881, William Wirt Winchester died of tuberculosis.
You know, it's funny you say that because I'm remembering now, like, I saw a picture of him. Mm-hmm. And, like, I don't know when that picture was taken that I saw, but he just looked so haunted and so sad. And
yeah, you can see he's got, like, really dark eyes.
Yeah, like, there's something really sad going on in him. And I don't, like, again, I don't know when the picture was taken. It could have been before all those people died in his life. But, like, he just looks like a man who had a lot of struggles.
Yeah.
Had a lot of pain.
He was dealing with tuberculosis complications for years. And the thing is, especially at that time, tuberculosis was very much like a lingering disease where you had good days, bad days. You know, you would have your coughing fits, you would be coughing up blood. There were some days where you would just like be confined to your bed. Like he had a really rough go his last couple of years.
Yeah.
William joined his father and Sarah's mother, who had passed away the previous May, becoming the third person to abandon Sarah Winchester that year.
Well, I would say, like, they abandoned her. They just sort of, you know.
She's left alone, though.
Yeah. Yeah. They didn't, like, say, I'm going to go out for some cigarettes and then never return.
Right, that's true.
Yeah.
Sarah Winchester is left distraught and alone. They have no children. So, in what's a remarkable instance for this time period, she inherited not only her husband's estate, but by proxy, her father-in-law's as well. Sarah ended up with 777 shares of Winchester stock. She also inherited the estate, valued around $362,000. All told, she wound up with about $20 million.
Whoa.
Which, in today's money, you want to take a guess how much that is?
Okay, in today's money, I'm just going to go out on a limb and say 120 million.
$500 million.
Oh, okay. That's more than I thought.
Yeah, $500 million.
That's a lot of personal pan pizzas.
And perhaps most importantly, honestly, she also had a controlling stake in the Winchester Repeating Arms Company because she owned over 50% of the company's stock.
Okay.
In the span of just 10 months, Sarah Winchester had gone from wife of a successful businessman to one of the richest women in the entire world. If
I didn't know any better, I'd be like jealous of her.
I know. Like, yeah.
She's killing it, man. Go on vacation. Have a good time. Enjoy yourself.
Unfortunately, it came at such a price.
Sure did.
But it's funny. It's funny. Your advice to her is go on a vacation and enjoy yourself.
That's my advice. My doctorly advice.
Because the lavish mansion that she's living in, that she'd been so happy to design all these years before, feels so empty to her now. Remember, she was already reclusive, so she retreats even further from the public eye and decides to start traveling.
Good for her. All right.
According to the legends of Sarah Winchester, around this time, she traveled to Boston and sought guidance from the spiritualist Adam Koontz. And allegedly, Koontz conducted a seance, or like a reading of Sarah of some kind, and found her to be plagued by spirits. And he claimed that she was haunted by the souls of the people slain by her father-in-law's rifles. And unless she found a way to escape them, she would never have any rest.
Did this guy really say that to her? Is this just like legend that he said this, or is it pretty well known that that's true?
So despite attempts by multiple biographers and researchers to try to find any evidence that this guy even existed, nobody's been able to track down any record of an Adam Koontz in Boston at that time.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
That said, as we said with the Fox sisters, there's been a rise in spiritualism around this time, and it's possible that Sarah visited someone, maybe not Adam Koontz. We don't know where that name came from exactly. Yeah, okay. So it's possible she visited a spiritualist. She sought some kind of guidance. We just don't have any record of who, when, or why. Mm-hmm. And it's possible she didn't do it at all.
Well, it just seems to me like this is the beginning of a narrative that is built around her.
Yeah, this is the first time where we start to see a divergence in what I would consider the actual real factual historical record, and starting to tiptoe into the legend territory.
Yeah.
Of, oh, well, she went and she saw a spiritualist, and he said, oh, I see all these ghosts around you haunting you, and you need to escape them or you'll never be free.
Yeah.
So reportedly, Sarah Winchester decided to turn to a nomadic lifestyle in hopes that the ghost wouldn't be able to follow her. That's, again, the narrative.
Okay, yes.
We know for a fact that Sarah toured Europe for some time, and public records show that she rarely spent any time at her home in New Haven for the next couple of years. You could interpret this as her trying to evade the spirits, but I think, kind of like what you said, Sarah Winchester just wanted to, like, fucking uproot her life and get away from the tragedy and see some different sights and just break herself out of the melancholy that existed in this big empty house.
Yeah, here I think we're starting to see a divergence of the gender norm here, because where we had William, her husband, who could bury himself in work after the loss of his daughter. What is Sarah supposed to do? She can't go to work. She can't bury herself in work. And so what does she do? What does she travels. And, you know, going to work and burying yourself in work is not as exciting. It doesn't make as good of a ghost story as depicting a woman who is just running all over the world. That's like, oh, great fodder for her running from the ghosts.
Right, yeah. She would stay in one place until the spirits caught up with her, and then she'd have to move again and blah, blah, blah. Yeah, of course. That's a much better ghost story than she was really sad and she was trying to find some way to break herself out of the depression.
Yeah. There wasn't much that a woman could do back then.
Right. In 1885, she got her chance to really do something to uplift herself and her spirits. Because her brother-in-law, Homer Sprague, was hired at Mills College in Oakland, California. Now, originally that was founded as a women's seminary, and the college changed to an educational institution in 1871 and became the first women's college east of the Rocky Mountains. Sarah Winchester, she doesn't really have a whole lot to do. So she went and she spent the winter of 1885 in Oakland with her sister Nettie and her brother-in-law Homer. And almost immediately, it became clear that Homer's position at the college wasn't going to work out because he kept butting heads with the principal. Oh. And by the following spring, he secured another job in North Dakota, and he and Nettie moved away. But Sarah Winchester has now spent a couple of months in Oakland, and she established a connection with the place. And she decided that she wanted to stay in California. See, arthritis had been starting to get to her. That's one of the reasons that she wanted to be in a warmer climate, but it's not the only reason that she decided to take up residence here. This country, this like Northern California country, reminded her of her recent travels to the Basque region in northern Spain. And she'd fallen in love with this like Spanish wine country.
Why didn't she stay there?
I don't know exactly. I don't know. I think, you know, she was just traveling, and sometimes that you find a place and that's the place. And this was just the place for her. Northern California was the place. So,
all right.
But, you know, if you think about Northern California, you do have these like villas.
Oh, these beautiful rolling hills.
Yeah,
it's
the rolling
green.
hills. You got vineyards. You got all of this.
I can see why.
She's like, I love this. I'm going to live here. So she recruited one of Winchester Repeating Arms' sales agents, a man named Ned Rambo.
No shit.
Ned Rambo.
He was a sales agent for Winchester?
Yeah.
Did he wear like a bandana?
I think we have to assume that he did.
I think he had to have worn a bandana.
Yeah. Yeah, a Winchester rifle over each arm. And
wow.
Yeah.
We just found like the true influence and inspiration for Sly's character.
Based on actual events.
Based on actual events. And now folks, we can say that officially.
He was a sales agent for Winchester Repeating Arms, but he came out to be a real estate agent for her.
And this was when he was not falling out of helicopters with machine guns and escaping vehicles that were on fire.
Yes, exactly.
I got it. Okay, spare time.
So he located a 45-acre plot of land with a modest farmhouse that was owned by a man named, seriously, John Hamm.
Oh my God, John Hamm's in this too?
John Hamm's
Oh my God, we got Rambo and John Hamm? Oh, wow. Well, this podcast took a very good turn.
So there was a moment at one point that Sarah Winchester was in a room with Rambo and John Hamm.
Holy crap. Oh my God.
So,
I just see like the mid-century furniture mixing with the Victorian furniture and like, I mean, mid-century, like 1900s
Right.
furniture,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
you know, and like, oh my God, I can just see it. It's amazing.
So to John Hamm, his estate was a working orchard. That's how he had been using it. But for Sarah, this is where she's going to rebuild her life. She paid $12,000 for the property and dubbed it Llanada Villa after the Basque region Llanada Alavisa. While Llanada Villa translates to plain estate, that property was destined to be anything but plain.
Well, when you've got Don Draper by your side, who has a lot of style, he knows what's up.
Right.
And you got Rambo ready to demolish anything you need. That shit's going to be fucking tight, man. It's going to be on fire. And now this isn't the Winchester house, right?
This is the Winchester house.
Oh, this is the Winchester. Because you talk about the Llanada Villa, and I'm like, what's...
Same thing.
Oh, it's the same thing.
Llanada Villa is her mansion. Llanada Villa is Winchester House. Yep.
For some reason, I thought it was like 45 acres in the middle of nowhere.
Well, it kind of was at that time.
But now it's not.
Yeah.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, at the time it was in the middle of nowhere.
Probably
Yeah.
sold out parcels to
Right.
other homes, and now
Yeah.
it's like this crowded suburban situation,
Yeah.
probably.
Yeah, people moved in around her. For
Okay,
sure.
got
Yeah.
it. So this is the Winchester house. All right. Now I'm caught up.
Sarah Winchester, she initially sets out dreaming of owning a house where she can get her remaining family together, where they can be reunited. To that end, she says, oh man, I have to expand this farmhouse. I need to bring it more in line with the opulent mansions that my family's used to seeing out in Connecticut. So she's got 45 acres available to her right now. And she says, I could probably buy up some more property if I need to. But within the first 6 months, she expanded the little farmhouse from 8 rooms to 26.
Whoa.
She started out using local architects, but quickly dismissed them and began drawing her own plans and passing them to her carpenters instead.
This is the hint that she should have been doing this the whole time. They're not good enough for her.
Within the first 6 months, right, she brought in architects and then just was like, I don't want you involved in this project. I'm going to do all of this myself. And she might not have known like all the ins and outs of the trade, but she did know how to communicate to the workers. And they were with her for a long time and they did a lot with her. So they were obviously really happy to follow her designs. She subscribed to journals and magazines, like architectural journals and that kind of thing. They're littered all over her house. And she begins designing her own layouts and plans. And I mean, remember, like her father was a carpenter, right? But she's never really had the opportunity to let her imagination just go wild.
Wow.
And she's captivated by the chance to build something herself. She's fascinated by architecture just from its like very basic conception. Like just architecture fascinates her. And she has all the money and all the resources she needs to do literally anything she wants.
It's freaking awesome, man. She's already, in my eyes, one of the greatest architects
Sure. Yeah.
of all time, just because of what she's done.
Yeah.
But imagine what she could have built across the country and like across the world. Like, you know, like how Frank Lloyd Wright had his stuff.
It's funny because as we talk, I mean, there's not across the country or across the world, but Sarah Winchester built more than you realize.
Oh, good. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. So each new wall, right? Each new wall, each doorway, everything. She's like making this building into this home that she's always wanted, right? And she wants her family to come and spend time with her. And so she's like, oh, I need a room for my sister. I need a room for so-and-so. I need this. I need all these kinds of things. And then she starts bringing in servants as well. And she's like, well, my servants should just live here with me. Well, if my servants are going to live here, they need their own quarters. And so she builds rooms for her servants too, on and on and on.
Why not?
But the reunion with her family never happens. The closest she got was when her sister Belle and her brother-in-law Louis Merriman moved to the area in 1887. And they stayed with Sarah briefly, but they needed their own place.
They had so many rooms.
Yeah, so it's a funny thing, man. We don't know why the Merrimans left Sarah's estate. I think that it was probably because the Merrimans couldn't handle the constant construction that was going on in the house.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
But we don't know.
Makes sense.
I imagine that it was kind of a chaotic existence during that time. But it doesn't matter. Sarah, she was more than happy to help them get on their feet out here. So in 1888, Sarah Winchester purchased a plot of land between San Francisco and San Jose. And that has a house on it as well. It's a horse breeding farm. A little 25 acres. Okay?
Oh, just a little bit of
just
land.
a little 25
Just
acres for her sister.
Okay.
And the house dates back to 1860. And so Sarah Winchester, she's looking at it. She's like, this needs some renovations. So under the direction of Sarah and Belle, her sister, the 4-room farmhouse expanded, adding 8 additional rooms, a lavish porch, and mismatched windows, which was a real architectural fad at the time.
Oh, cool.
This is where I said, she's interested in like what's hot architecturally. She's really like on the cusp of that. And so she was bringing some of these, because at the time, California is still very much like kind of Spanish Mission, villa type of look. And Sarah Winchester is bringing these New England mansion sensibilities to the West Coast. The sisters started calling the property El Sueño, which means
the dream.
The dream, right? And they have this dream themselves of raising horses on this property. Meanwhile, construction continues at Sarah's own residence, Granada Villa. Remember, like, she intends to entertain here. And so to do so, according to Sarah anyway, she needs a ballroom. She needs bedrooms for all her traveling guests.
Absolutely.
You know, I mean, the grand ballroom that she had added to her house cost 3 times the value of the house.
Oh my goodness.
And features inlaid parquet flooring and hand-carved detailing across an opulent mantelpiece.
Wow, very nice.
No less than 13 different species of wood are in that room.
Huh. Well, I bet you love that, Mr. Woodman. Woodman. Yeah, you're Woodman. What's the word I'm looking for? Guy. Man.
Woodworker?
Person. Woodworker.
Thank you.
There you go.
I tried really hard to find out what the species are, but nobody seems to list it.
Nobody gives a shit. Just you. I love it.
It's funny because there are 13 wood species there, which of course 13 is later one of those things that everybody keeps going back to, and like, oh, there were 13 this, 13 that,
magic
whatever.
Number.
I'm not even convinced that there were 13 wood species in this room because I can't seem to find them anywhere. Right.
There's no like hard data on it.
Yeah.
Not. Okay.
So the ballroom also famously features Shakespeare windows. So they're these stained glass panels, and they're inscribed with quotes from Richard II and Troilus and Cressida. Richard's comes from his monologue in Act 5, Scene 5, and reads, "These same thoughts people this little world." The Troilus and Cressida one is taken from Ulysses' monologue from Act 4, Scene 5, and reads, "Wide unclasp the tables of their thoughts." Both of these passages speak of people plagued by their thoughts. And I'm sure Sarah identified with that idea as a widow living alone on the other side of the country away from her family's home. The Richard II monologue, to me, reads as him comparing his time in a prison cell to the outside world. Where the world is full of people, the cell is populated only by himself and his own thoughts. But it's also about his dissatisfaction with his place. He says, "Thus play I one person in many people, and non-contented. Sometimes I am king, then treasons make me myself a beggar." And he concludes, realizing, "Nor I, nor any man that but man is, with nothing shall be pleased till he is eased with being nothing."
Ooh.
You'll never find peace until you find contentment being nothing.
Yeah.
Dead.
Yeah.
It's a passage about coming to terms with death, with your own end and ceasing to be. It's easy to understand how this could have connected with Sarah, right? Like processing this incredible loss that she's seen all throughout her life. The Troilus and Cressida passage comes just after Cressida's arrival as a prisoner at the Greek camp. Ulysses insists that she kiss everyone in camp, but when she tries to kiss him, he rejects her. Then when she leaves, he calls her wanton. And this hypocritical nature is all over the play, ultimately leaving the audience with a complex view of Cressida, who is often depicted as an unfaithful lover, which is much more complex in Shakespeare's version. I'm not clear what this passage means to Sarah, if it means anything. It's always possible that both of these lines were meant to be divorced from their roots because they were just things that she liked.
Sure. Yeah.
And read, wide unclasp the tables of their thoughts. These same thoughts people this little world. Which to me indicates that if you allow your thoughts freedom to roam, to grow and change, they fill the space around you.
Okay.
And that seems in line with what Sarah's going through with her like fervent, constant construction and personal ingenuity. She released her mind and let it create the architecture that she wanted, and then she added it to her home.
That makes sense. Yeah. And it kind of leads to the idea that it's a healing process.
Yeah. Yeah, it's the way she processed her grief.
Yeah. It's interesting, this building of creating a space for a family that isn't there anymore and wanting the extended family to come in, but never quite achieving that old feeling of togetherness that she probably once had, and
so that she was striving for.
She's always striving for now at this point, and it's just really sad. And
again, remember, for better or for worse, she was always living with her in-laws, and then all of a sudden, everybody's dead, and then she moves. She tours Europe. She comes back. She moves to Oakland. And then the people she was staying with leave, and all of a sudden she's this woman with no connections in Oakland. This is what she does. This is what she does with her time. It's the way that she can feel connected and home and happy and safe and all of these things. She's making this place into her own existence.
Yeah, it sounds almost just an obsessive compulsion, and I don't mean this in like a bad way on her part. I just think like maybe, and I'm making shit up in my head, I'm a writer, but I'm like, if you build it, they will come. So like meaning, and I don't mean the ghosts, I mean like, if I build this room, maybe now they will visit and they'll stay.
So it's funny you mention that, because there's a part of me that almost thinks that Sarah didn't want people to come.
Oh, interesting.
And the continual construction prevented people from bothering her.
Dude, I don't know.
There's two different ways to see it, and I don't know what the actual correct answer is.
I mean, the way that like, to me, and I'm not there, but like the way that I envision the Victorian mind is like, the wilder something is, the more rubberneckers you're gonna get.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's true too. Come see my extravagant house.
Come see this craziness happening. And I don't think that was her intent. I don't think she wanted just every Tom, Dick, and Harry to want to like family. But maybe her family. Yeah. To me, as somebody who, I mean, this is not the same thing at all, but like I have like an OCD issue, and it strikes me as somebody who is like, if I do this, it's going to be okay. If I do this, it's going to be safe.
It does have that feeling, right? Like if I do this, I can make sure that this will keep everything okay.
Right. Right. Things will be better if I do this one thing.
Right.
Which is, it just strikes me as something like that. Not comparing the two, because I don't know her situation. I only know mine. And
the other thing that we'll talk about in just a minute is that a lot of the construction was her. Remember that she's essentially learning on the job. So she's doing something and then saying, oh, I could do this better, and then doing it again, and then doing it again, and then like, well, we should do we should do the same kind of room layout in this room instead, and we'll do it better in this one. And then this one, oh, this doesn't quite work for me, so take down this wall, and then we'll make this room bigger. We'll make the other, like, it's that kind of, she's kind of spitballing her construction because she doesn't have that formal training. So, you know, as things don't work, she has to fix them as she goes.
Right. So it's like probably, I mean, what I just said earlier could be complete bullshit and not true. And it could just be like she is iterating and getting better and better because she is so passionate and she just loves it so much.
Right.
You know? Mm-hmm. And yeah, I mean, that makes sense.
That's kind of my suspicion.
Yeah.
Yeah. Her stained glass windows, by the way, were claimed to have been fashioned by the Louis Comfort Tiffany Company, one of the most famous glass artists in history, of course, right? Tiffany lamps. Mm-hmm. However, recently, an envelope was discovered in one of the dining rooms of the Winchester House during a renovation, and that envelope was marked as the Pacific American Decorative Company. And this company was founded by John Mallon, a gold prospector turned artist and based in San Francisco. And he designed the windows for the San Francisco City Hall and Stanford University. It's now believed that he created the windows in the Winchester House.
Oh, okay.
See, the Merriman's house, Sarah's sister that she bought, that was purchased a year after the Stanford University was completed, and it's just a couple miles down the road. So it's no surprise that Sarah would have seen those stained glass windows. From an efficiency standpoint, it's probably way easier to have the windows constructed by somebody local rather than shipping them all the way from New York.
Yeah.
Employing a virtual army of carpenters, builders, construction at Yanada Villa continued for 12 years. Ever the experimental architect, right? She's very much experimental. Sarah sketched designs on scraps of paper, sometimes like tablecloths, whatever she could find. And she would work just kind of as the muse struck her. So she would be doing something else and be like, oh, I have this idea. And then she'd sketch it down. But the problem with this approach, as we kind of talked about, that she didn't always see the pitfalls in her designs as she went along. So she wrote in a letter, I am constantly having to make an upheaval for some reason. For instance, my upper hall, which leads to a sleeping arrangement, was rendered so unexpectedly dark by a little addition that after a number of people had missed their footing on the stairs, I took out a wall and added a skylight.
All right, this is iteration.
Exactly,
like, okay.
right? So she's like, oh, I didn't realize that this was going to be so dark. And then, of course, she has the money. She has the time. So she's like, take out my wall, put in a skylight. Oh, that skylight looks nice.
Why not?
And there are advantages to being able to do this. You're like a live-in architect, right?
Yeah.
So she starts customizing the house. And as her needs change, the house changes. She built a staircase that had 44 steps and 7 flights, like 7 turns, that covered the distance of 1 floor.
Wow.
44 steps. But it's because, remember, she's got arthritis and she's having trouble walking. Oh. So she made a bunch of little steps. So it could be an easier journey for herself.
That's very
right?
cute. I like that. That's smart.
As she starts aging, and as her house is expanding, she starts having trouble locating her employees because there's more and more and more rooms getting added on, right? Oh, wow. So she installed something that she called an annunciator, which was a very early intercom system. So she could easily locate them and call them to where she was.
Was this something that she invented, or did she pull this from some other...
I don't know if this was entirely from her concept or if she took this from somewhere else.
Okay.
It was new. It wasn't the kind of thing that you would see in houses at the time.
Okay.
Have you read about the peepholes in the Winchester house?
No.
So there are peepholes in different rooms that you can peer into different rooms, and she needed those so her servants could check on her and make sure that she was okay. Again, she has these crippling bouts of arthritis where she has trouble moving.
So they can't just walk into the room? What's the peephole? Like, they can't just, like, walk into the room and check on her? So they could just look at her. It's a little weird.
It's less, what's the word? Not invasive, exactly. Because she might not need their help. So think about it. Like if you're in a room and you're doing fine, your employee can look in on you and say, "Oh, she's fine," and then they can walk away. But if she needs help, then they can say, oh, wow, she needs help. But to have somebody constantly opening the door and being like, Mrs. Winchester, are you okay? Is a little, it takes away her autonomy.
Okay. I can't put myself in her position, in the position of somebody who's arthritis. She's older. It's a huge house. I'm trying to put myself in her head, and it's like, okay, I see that. Yeah. That makes some sense. How old is she now at this point? Like,
she's in her 40s.
She's young.
Yeah, 40s or 50s. Yeah.
Okay, she's really young.
Yeah.
People aged differently back then, I think.
They sure did. Yeah. She installed electricity and plumbing, which were extravagant at this time, right? Mm-hmm. The plumbing, get this, the plumbing connected to her inner solarium, where it watered her plants, and then it ran off her zinc floor and onto her flower bed outside.
That is so smart.
Yeah.
That's recycling. Very green of her.
Working off just her own plans, she expanded the house to 7 stories. Each additional floor, it's got more rooms on it for more guests and more employees. And it transforms the house into an estate that's like begging for lavish parties, right?
Oh, yeah.
But Sarah rejects guests, and she keeps saying the work isn't done. The house isn't ready yet. It's not ready. She wrote in a letter, I hope someday to get so situated that I shall feel that it would not be an imposition on my friends to invite them to visit me.
Oh, wow.
So she keeps working, and she keeps being like, no, you can't visit yet. The house isn't ready. You wouldn't like it.
Oh, wow. She really had a bit of an obsession about all of this. This is interesting.
This like dream of being done is being constantly hampered by constant construction. She gets new ideas, new sparks, and she starts modifying the house again based off of that. Like, you're building a new floor, and then she's like, oh, I need a staircase here, so let's put a staircase here, right? And then she starts having like big doors opening to tiny closets, smaller doors leading to bigger rooms.
That's cool.
It starts to get more hectic, right?
Yeah.
A 1970s renovation uncovered an intact but unused room that she might have forgotten about and sealed off unknowingly. Although there may be another explanation for that we'll talk about in the next episode.
Okay. It reminds me of like Alice in Wonderland.
Another room that fell victim to her chaotic construction was the Blue Room, later called the Seance Room. This room, this is one of the most famous rooms in the house, has 1 entrance and 3 exits. 1 through the entrance door, 1 that's an 8-foot drop to the kitchen, and 1 passage that only opened from the outside.
Why would you have an 8-foot drop to the kitchen? That's dangerous. Oh, you gonna talk about it?
We will talk about that.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, we'll talk about that because there's an incident that happens that explains a lot of the not chaotic construction, but a lot of the questions regarding these rooms. So hold all those questions for our next episode, and we'll talk about all of that.
All right.
Legend, of course, talks about these rooms, the false rooms, and the confused nature of the building, and that it was all deliberate. And the story goes that Sarah built dummy doors and staircases to disorient the spirits that plagued her. If a regular person had trouble navigating the building, wouldn't the dead also lose their way? Right?
Yes, of course.
That's the idea, right?
It makes sense.
So the Blue Room has its own particular mythology. So legend claims that Sarah conducted nightly seances in that room, where she would ask the spirits for guidance, and they would tell her what to build next, and she'd follow their advice. All of this, I think, shows the conflicting and downright sexist accounts of the paranormal associated with Sarah Winchester. Because, okay, first off, if she's trying to confuse the ghosts, how would they know to get to the seance room? Like, wouldn't they be fucking stuck in the pantry trying to open doors to nowhere? Like,
that's true.
How would they find the seance room to get to the seance room?
If you're trying to confuse ghosts, like seances would be like the last thing you want. You don't want to bring them to you.
Right? If you were going to have seances, I think you'd have seances outside where the ghosts could easily get to, and then you'd go into the house and they wouldn't get there.
You'd have like a little cottage, seance cottage.
So first off, logistically, this makes no sense. Secondly, What a reductive and misogynistic view of Sarah Winchester and her talents. If you take the ghost hypothesis at face value, it means that Sarah wasn't designing that house herself, but instead letting dead men tell her how to build it.
Oh, yeah. No.
Now, this was probably a popular narrative because women were definitely not meant to be architects at this level at this time, right? But by making the spirits the true masterminds, it explained not only the disorderly nature of the house, but it also allowed people of this time to recontextualize Sarah Winchester into the gentle feminine ideal where she should be.
Right. In this way, it saved many male heads from exploding spontaneously.
Right.
That would have just been a tragedy.
Exactly.
So, yes.
Now, we'll talk more about the true origins of ghost stories in the next episode, where they really came from.
Cool.
For now, I'll just tell you that the Blue Room, aka the Seance Room, was actually occupied by Sarah's gardener, Tommy Nishihara. And he was in charge of maintaining the impressive grounds, which he co-designed with her.
Oh, that's really cool.
Yeah, this garden, it's got yucca palms, hedge walls, junipers, and daisies, which are her favorite flower. And she also took a lot of inspiration from Eastern gardening techniques.
Japanese gardens are just so gorgeous. I love them.
Nishihara, by the way, and his family were just one example of her diversity of staff. She employed Dutch, Italians, Chinese, Irish, and Japanese, as well as local American workers. If needed, she would give them housing in her estate, and she paid them fairly regardless of their background.
That's very nice. Very good. Did they stay in nice quarters as well? I imagine it was all kind of nice.
She built rooms, dude.
Yeah.
Like
she didn't make them shitty. Like, she made them nice.
No, I mean...
Everything was nice.
Like, that was one of the reasons that she was making all these additions. Because she had all these workers who were staying with her, and she would build rooms for them in her house.
It's a nice deal, man.
Yeah.
And they probably had some privacy because it's so big.
You had tons of privacy.
I would like to think that maybe they had, like, good space.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
I hope.
And with this, you begin to see the raised eyebrows from the surrounding community. Because keeping such a diverse population, it's just not something people do. And so the whispered rumors start to grow louder, and stories about her start to enter popular gossip. And with these growing rumors and San Jose's rising questions about the mysterious widow and her sprawling mansion, we'll pick up next time in the conclusion of our series on Sarah Winchester and the Winchester Mystery House.
Cool. All right.
Yeah.
So people are... Okay, I'm not going to say anything. I'm just curious.
Go ahead.
People are, like, drawing... Like, I don't understand what, like, having employees in your house has to do with ghosts.
Oh, make no mistake. It's not that she has employees. It's that she has non-white employees.
What does that have to do with ghosts?
We'll talk about it next time, but it's the fact that she is eccentric.
Oh.
The ghost stories, it's not like one day Sarah is living in her house and the next day someone's like, oh, she's communicating with spirits. It is Sarah's living in her house. People start saying her house is weird. She's weird. Here's all the reasons that she's weird. Oh. You know, there's constant construction. I see that she keeps employees who aren't white. I see these weird things. She's never comes out in the public eye. Yeah. Other things that we'll talk about in the next episode, and then you're like, oh, she's weird, and she's probably talking to the dead too. You know, it's this sort of thing.
That's the slippery slope fallacy.
It's the slippery slope. Yep.
Okay, that makes sense from a narrative perspective. Now that I know that it's that fallacy, then it's starting to make some sense. Like the pieces are coming together. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, got it.
All that is to say, and kind of everything that we've talked about to this point is to say that Sarah Winchester is a true oddity in Northern California at this time. And seeing her spending so much money on a house that is just looking weirder and to most of the outside people like more monstrous. You are trying to find the reason for that. Why would a woman do that? That's kind of what our whole series is about. Why would a woman do that?
Yeah.
And so you can take the direction of, because she's hiding from spirits, or she's trying to trap the spirits in the house, or whatever. Mm-hmm. Or it's just that this woman really enjoys what she's doing. She's fascinated by it, and she finally has the resources to do it. Mm-hmm. And so she's going to do it as hard as she fucking can.
Yeah. And never once did all these people think for a second, she's a person.
She's a person, yeah. And maybe she's like really hurting, and this is the way that she can soothe herself.
Man, small minds. They're going to end us all.
Once again, we see people unable to handle the women of the time having their own thoughts, ideas, purpose, intentions, set of skills, all of this. Yeah.
It must be crazy. It must be ghosts. Mm-hmm. Yeah. It must be something.
Right.
That's very sad. But sounds like it'll be interesting next week, so very cool.
It'll be interesting. Cool. Yeah, also the ghost stories are going to happen later than you think.
Oh, interesting.
In history, yeah.
Okay.
Which is also pretty cool. So,
cool.
Next time we will conclude with Sarah Winchester.
All right.
And her mysterious house.
Yeah, thanks for listening, everybody.
Thanks for listening. And until next time, remember, success comes from standing out, not fitting in.
Don Draper.
Thanks for listening to Slaying Monsters. If you like the podcast and what we do, please share it with others or leave us a rating and review. For questions, suggestions, and other feedback, reach out to us, slayingmonsterspodcast@gmail.com, and stay up to date by following us on Instagram @slayingmonsterspodcast. Your support helps us grow, and we are truly grateful to have our listeners and community.